Eric always believed in stability. He believed that if you build your life step by step, keep your word, and stay true to your principles, everything will work out. He was 35 years old and had been married for over a decade to the woman he considered the love of his life, Gwen. She was beautiful, intelligent, reserved, a little withdrawn, but, as he saw it, always honest. He trusted her as he trusted himself. They met in college. She was studying graphic design. He was studying architecture. At first, they only saw each other at parties, but 6 months later they were living together in a small apartment in Boston. They married 4 years later, and since then, life had taken on a predictable, pleasant structure. Work, travel, weekly movies under the covers, and mandatory get-togethers with friends at Lake Grayville every summer. Among those friends was Nate, Eric's childhood friend. They met at the age of 7, caught frogs in the pond, stole beer from the garage together, smoked their first cigarettes behind the school, and even joined the army together. Nate was loud, funny, a little cocky, but loyal. Eric often referred to him as his brother. Gwen always smiled when she heard this, although lately her smile seemed insincere. Last year, after a painful divorce, Nate began to visit the city more often. Sometimes he stayed with Eric and Gwen for a night or two. Eric, as always, was hospitable, but Gwen increasingly avoided such evenings. She explained it by fatigue, a desire to have space for two, hinting that she and Eric didn't have enough time for themselves. At the time, Eric considered these to be minor misunderstandings. However, little things began to appear that alarmed him. She even took her phone to the bathroom. Messages came late at night, and she nervously hid the screen. She laughed less often. Previously, there had been a warm connection between them, but now their bed seemed empty even when they were both lying in it. She started leaving him alone on weekends, as if she were just going to a friend's or her mother's. But every time he tried to call, she was uncomfortable talking. Eric explained it away as fatigue, the routine fatigue of marriage. He thought she was burning out, that she needed care. So one evening he decided to surprise her. He booked a table at her favorite restaurant, bought the perfume she wore on their first date, and even the lace lingerie she once showed him on a website. While preparing dinner, he looked for the recipe for her favorite salad and remembered the old iPad that had been sitting on the shelf for years. He turned it on, not even suspecting that this would be the point of no return. The browser opened with the previous tabs. Among them was email. An open letter from Nate. Subject, I can't lie anymore. The first lines hit him like a brick in the chest. Gwen, I think we've gone too far. I can't look him in the eye anymore. I love you, but this is wrong. The world around Eric seemed to freeze. The ceiling began to press down on him. The floor began to sway. He reread the letter again, and again, and again, hoping he was mistaken, that it was some kind of misunderstanding. But the words remained the same. He sat in silence, holding the tablet in his hands, while in the room next door lay the lingerie he had bought with her in mind. With them in mind. With the love that, as it now turned out, was only one-sided. That was how the peaceful, warm evening ended. And a completely different story began. Eric stared at the tablet screen as if it could explain to him what was happening. He reread the letter over and over again, but the words did not change. They did not disappear. They remained as cold and sharp as ever. I love you, but it's not right. He felt no anger at that moment, only emptiness, like a hole in the middle of his chest that sucked everything in: trust, hope, plans for the future. It was even difficult to breathe. He put the tablet on the table and sat down. He sat silently for a long time. He didn't move. The thought pulsed in his head. She's cheating on me with Nate. With Nate. If it had been someone else, a random man, a colleague, even an ex, it would have hurt. But the fact that it was his best friend, it destroyed everything inside him. It was easier to believe until now. The illusion gave him peace. But Eric had always been a man of action. He wasn't the type to hide. And now he needed to know the truth. The whole truth. If they were cheating, how long had it been going on? Where? Was it still happening? And most importantly, why? He went into the bedroom. He opened the desk drawer. There was Gwen's old notebook. She used to write ideas for projects in it. And between the pages, as he had hoped, he found a sticker with the login and password for her second email account. She had long said that she only used it for freelance work. He had never had reason to doubt her. Until today, Eric entered the information. He logged into her email, and his heart sank again. The inbox contained dozens of emails from Nate. They were touching, dirty, sincere, and guilty. They called each other Sunshine and Kitty. The emails were dated back to spring. Photos from their trips, the forest, the hotel, even a selfie from the car that Eric himself had lent Nate several times. They were cheating on him in his world, with his things, in his life. And what's worse, they weren't just cheating physically. There was something deeper. They were talking about him. Eric. With regret, with guilt, sometimes even with resentment. He hasn't seen me in a long time, Gwen wrote. I know he deserves a better friend. But I can't give you up, Nate replied. In the drafts folder, an unsent letter to him. From Gwen. Eric, I never wanted to hurt you. It all started as foolishness, as emotional weakness. But then, I got confused. Nate became my outlet when you disappeared into your projects all the time. I'm not making excuses, I lost us. He felt physically ill. He felt his heart constricting. Everything he had built turned out to be an illusion. All the years of trust and devotion were a lie. He wanted to run outside, scream, erase it all, smash his laptop screen. But he remained seated. His eyes slowly filled with tears. Not from pain, from bitter helplessness. When he regained his composure a little, he opened the shared cloud where they kept family photos. And there, in a hidden folder, he found everything he feared, even more pictures. Hugs, kisses. One shot was from a room he recognized. It was their house on the lake. The place where he and Gwen had once dreamed of raising children. There she was with Nate. Time slowed down. Eric clenched his fists. He wanted to do something. Something more than just sitting there. But at that moment, he knew one thing. There was no turning back. And when he heard the front door lock click in the evening, he didn't run to her with open arms like he used to. He didn't say, "Hello, my love." He just sat in the dark living room and waited. Ahead of him was a conversation that would change them forever. Gwen entered the apartment with a bag of groceries in her hands. Her steps were familiar, mundane. She even hummed something to herself, unaware that a few meters ahead of her was a storm that had been brewing for a long time. Eric sat motionless in the dimly lit living room, like a shadow. His face was illuminated only by the soft glow of the tablet screen in front of him. The room was unusually quiet. "Hi," she said as she entered, not noticing him at first. "I bought that sauce you like." Silence. Gwen stopped. She sensed that something was wrong. She turned around, and her gaze met his. Eric's eyes were calm but empty. It wasn't anger. It was the emptiness that comes after a storm. The exhaustion of a battle that hadn't started yet, but had already been lost. "Sit down," he said finally. She put the bags on the table and slowly sat down. She was silent for a few seconds, staring at his face. Then she noticed the tablet. An open letter. Hers. From Nate. "You read," she began, but stopped. Her voice trembled. "Everything," he replied. "The letters. The photos. The draft." Gwen covered her face with her hands. She took a deep breath. When she looked at him again, there was no fear in her eyes. There was only heavy, exhausted honesty. "I knew this would happen someday. That you would find out. I had no right. I betrayed not only you, Eric. I betrayed myself. We lost touch long ago. We were close, but not together. I felt like I was drowning. And Nate, he became my lifeline." "Nate," Eric repeated with a bitter smile. "My best friend. The person I trusted more than my brother. And you. The two people I loved most." Gwen leaned forward. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she remained calm. "I didn't plan this. Never. At first it was an accident. We were both weak. And then, we lost control. I know how it sounds. And I know that nothing justifies what I did." Eric was silent. His fingers clenched the armrest of the chair, but his voice was steady. "Do you love him?" She didn't answer right away. She looked past him. Finally, she said, "I don't know. Maybe. But it doesn't matter. Not now." "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Why didn't you just leave?" "Because I was afraid. And I didn't want to lose you. I wanted to find myself, but not destroy you. I was weak, Eric." There was silence. Heavy, dense, like a blanket of lead. Gwen wiped away her tears, but no longer hid behind excuses. She looked the truth in the eye, just as he did. "I can't forgive this," Eric said. "Maybe someday I'll forgive you as a person, but not as a wife. We can't be us after this. Everything we had is gone." Gwen nodded. No objections. For the first time, no resistance. I'll go, she said quietly. I'll give you space. Time. I don't expect you to understand or forgive anything. But thank you for at least listening. She got up and slowly gathered her things. And when the door closed behind her, Eric was left in an empty apartment. No shouting, no breaking dishes. Just him and the emptiness left behind after love. Another stage was to come. Pain, anger, searching for answers. But now he just sat there and finally allowed himself to break down. The night after the conversation passed in a fog. Eric lay in bed, but he didn't sleep. He didn't think. He didn't cry. He just stared at the ceiling, feeling his mind refuse to accept reality. Every second dragged on like an hour. Gwen was gone. She was no longer in this apartment, in their lives. And yet, she was everywhere. In every object, every smell, every silence that now seemed unbearable. In the morning, he woke up to the sound of the alarm clock. Habit. The emptiness next to him in bed reminded him that habits were all he had left. He washed his face and looked at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes were tired, his face colorless. The person in front of him looked 10 years older. And it was him. The next few days were a marathon of survival. He went to work, talked to clients, drew blueprints, laughed at meetings. Everything was as usual, but it was all an act. Inside, everything was burning. Anger came in waves. Sometimes unexpectedly, for no reason. He could be sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, and suddenly want to throw the cup at the wall. He wanted Nate to feel the same way. He wanted Gwen to cry every day. He wrote angry messages to them, but didn't send them. He deleted them. Then he started again. It was a struggle between who he was and who he could become. He walked a lot. Miles of aimless walks around the city. Silence in his headphones. He was afraid of music. Because every song reminded him. Of her. Of them. Of how they betrayed each other. He looked at the photos again. Not to torture himself, but to make sure once and for all, it was real. Not a nightmare. Not a mistake. It happened. Their hugs, their smiles, not something accidental. It was a world that existed parallel to his. A world where he did not exist. And then came sadness. So deep that it seemed to consume him. Everything in Eric's life seemed fake. His marriage, his friendship, even his own identity. He didn't know who he was anymore. The person he loved, was proud of, protected, betrayed him, not with malice, but with cold, mundane betrayal, like a practical decision. And the man he considered a brother just as easily trampled on everything sacred. He recalled moments over and over again. How he held her hand in the hospital when she broke her wrist. How they chose curtains together. How Nate stood next to him at the wedding, hugging him after the vows. How he said then, "I'll always be there for you. You're my brother." Those memories now tasted like poison. A week later, he broke down. He sat in the shower, fully clothed, and just cried. For the first time, he cried for real. He was shaking. It wasn't crying from pain. It was the moaning of a soul that didn't know what to do next. And at that moment, he said aloud for the first time, "They killed a part of me." After that, something changed. The pain did not go away, forgiveness did not come. But understanding came. That things could not go on like this. That he had to choose, to remain in ruins or to start building something new. Even if that new thing began with revenge. Gwen had a friend named Sarah. The same one who said at the wedding that she would envy anyone who could ever love the way Gwen loved. Sarah was beautiful, confident, a little daring. And she had been eyeing him for a long time. And now Eric thought, why not look her way? The morning after the shower, when he allowed himself to break down for the first time, was different. No, the pain hadn't gone away. But something in him had hardened. In the mirror, he no longer saw a broken man, but a survivor. There was something new in his eyes. Not coldness, but clarity. For the first time in a long time, Eric knew what to do next. And it wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about getting himself back. First, he did what he was afraid to do. He wrote to Gwen. Shortly, without hysterics. "I'm not yours. Never again. And you can't speak for me again. We're breaking up. That's it." She didn't reply right away. But an hour later, she wrote back, "I understand. And I accept your decision. Forgive me, if you can." He didn't reply. That same day, Eric called Sarah. He had been thinking about it for a long time, ever since he first thought about her after everything. She was a close friend of Gwen's, but she had never hidden her feelings for him. And, to be honest, he had always felt it. He just didn't think it was important. But now, everything was different. Hi, Sarah. It's Eric. Eric. Her voice sounded surprised. Hi. Is everything okay? Not really, but would you like to have coffee? Just to talk. She paused for a second. Yes, I'm free tonight. The meeting was simple. No drama. Just a regular coffee shop. She came in a dark sweater, no makeup, with that same slight irony in her eyes that Eric always noticed. And understanding. No questions asked. They talked for hours. Not about Gwen, not about Nate, about childhood, movies, books, music, about everything that didn't hurt. And when the evening was over, she just said, if you want, I'm here. Not to fill someone's void, but so you can remember who you were before all this. He smiled. For the first time, sincerely. The following weeks changed him. Eric sold his old car, the one he had lent to Nate. He threw out his bed. He repainted the walls in his apartment. He even changed his Wi-Fi password. It was as if every little thing helped him get rid of the traces of the past. He no longer wanted to remember. He didn't want to live in the shadow of someone else's betrayal. Gwen tried to contact him several times. Once she even stood silently at his door. But he didn't open it. He looked through the peephole, saw her pain, and for the first time felt calm. Not joy, not satisfaction, but calm. He was no longer a victim. And Sarah became more than he expected. She didn't ask questions, she didn't pressure him. She was just there. And it was her presence that made him feel alive again. One evening she said, you have the right to be happy, and you don't have to justify yourself to anyone, not even to yourself. That evening, he touched her hand for the first time. Carefully, like someone who had just climbed out of cold water and was afraid to dive back in. But she didn't pull away. A new chapter was beginning. Without illusions, without false promises, but with someone by his side who didn't wear a mask. And with a new Eric, stronger, more open, able to move on. Half a year had passed. The streets no longer smelled of autumn leaves, and the first snow lay on the windowsill, covering the world with a thin blanket. Eric sat in the kitchen with a cup of black coffee, watching the steam rise and disappear. Just as his old life had disappeared, slowly at first, then abruptly, leaving only a fog behind. He thought about everything that had happened. Not with pain, with clarity. He no longer lived in the past. He had accepted it. What Gwen and Nate had done had left a permanent mark. But that mark no longer hurt. It was part of the story, not the center of it. Now he was back to who he had been before marriage. An architect who created, but not just houses. Himself. A new version of himself. Music played in his house. The rooms were warm. He was no longer afraid of memories. He had even recently started looking at old photos again. He smiled. Not because he wanted to go back, but because he had learned to let go. Sarah was lying in bed a few feet away from him. She was asleep. Her breathing was steady. Her presence was calm. They weren't yet a couple making plans for the rest of their lives. But they were real. She hadn't come to replace someone else, but to be there when he needed her. And he valued that more than loud promises. He had learned a few things. First, boundless trust can be wonderful, but also dangerous. People don't always reciprocate it. And it's not always about malice. Sometimes it's about weakness. But that doesn't lessen the pain. And it doesn't justify betrayal. Second, no one is obligated to remain in ruins. Loss does not mean the end. It can be a beginning, if you are not afraid to rebuild. And third, you cannot control the actions of others. But you can always choose how to respond. Eric did not become cynical. He did not become a person who is afraid of love. On the contrary, he became more attentive. To himself. To others. To the moments that make up happiness. And perhaps most importantly, he forgave. Not for them. For himself. Because forgiveness is not about freeing the guilty. It's about freeing yourself from them. His life did not become a fairy tale. But it became real. And real is more than perfect. When Sarah woke up and approached him, he reached out his hand to her. She took it, without words. And that was enough. Because sometimes a new beginning starts with a simple gesture. And with a man who has learned to live again.
Subscribe and like, and send the video to your friends.